we found it. This is it. What does it take to get excited about the worst division we've ever seen? News that could be, in some ways, the downfall of someone who we thought to be largely a perfect baseball human and player.
So I am saddened and bummed by this story. However, I find it to be more fascinating, I think, than you do.
No,
maybe
it's
a little
fair.
bit. Like I'm not like amped that this happened, but I do think that there are just so many levels to it, and we're going to do our best to get into it on this episode. Now, just to be clear, it is 10:30 a.m. Central Time where I am, 9:30 Mountain Time, the official time of Baseball Barbacast, because I love going into the mountains. Things are going to develop in the story. Like, a lot will change, more info will come out, but we're going to do our best to kind of educate you, the listener, lay things out, and then at the end, after we take a break, chat a little bit about how we feel about the whole story, and what the best in quotes and worst in quotes case scenarios are here.
Yeah, because this is all still so fresh, still so developing. This dropped when I was on a plane home from New York, and opening my phone, turning off airplane mode to 50 text messages about something that is so hard to wrap your mind around at so many levels, right? Like, when I first saw the headlines, when you first told me, when we talked about it on the phone, when I landed, to the headlines that I was seeing in the various tweets, then when I finally got home and actually read every word of the ESPN report, my perception of this whole situation has just fluctuated like crazy. And that's what makes this really challenging. But as you said, we are going to do our best to at least lay out what we feel like we know based on the reporting. And then, while speculation is sometimes irresponsible, I think in this case, we can at least start to think about what happens next.
Before we hop in, I just want to say something about gambling and about addiction. Gambling addiction is an addiction like and unlike any other addiction. And I think there are comedic threads to this entire story. Like, the idea of Ippei flying home and coach. Like, to me, that's a little funny, right? But there are components of this story that are heavy and sad and like devastating, depending on what is and what is not true. And I think that there are probably people listening to this that have had gambling addiction touch their lives in one way or another. And I just want to give it the kind of level of reverence that deserves. And maybe people are listening to this and like, wow, Jake and Jordan are a lot more serious about this story than I thought they'd be. Like, yes and no. I think maybe in time, like, I tweeted jokes about it, and like, I think that like I said, there are aspects of it that are funny, that are interesting, but there are also aspects of this that are incredibly serious. So we're going to do our best to kind of thread that needle a little bit.
It's hard. And I guess the last thing I'll say, and then we can start getting into the timeline. Like, as far as scandals go, like, I mean, we've had already recently, maybe not as much in baseball, but we have had at least some hints of that, gambling related scandals where it is very easy to just be like, oh my God, like, how stupid can you be? Like, you got suspended. Like, this happened in football, right? Guys getting suspended for however many games because they bet while they were in the locker room or whatever. Like, dude, there's variations of this.
The Brad Bohannon University of Alabama baseball betting scandal where he was just like the dumbest move ever. That's just 100% jokes for me. Yeah. Just because this is connected to someone who is the sport right now, and because it exemplifies or may exemplify like the breaking down of trust and friendship and all these other things that go into it, we'll just put a little bit more seriousness on it. Let's dive in. Okay. First things first. What the actual hell? Okay. When this I just want to just before we, what?
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah. Yeah. Because again, when you landed, yeah,
you must have been quite confused, dog.
Yeah. I mean, the first text I see is from my brother, and it just says Ippei no in all caps. Like, what could that possibly mean? I mean, I'm like getting like worried because then I'm fluctuating between like, what could this possibly be? And then as I'm starting to see these things, it's just like, oh my gosh, because remember, the larger context here, it's not just that Ohtani is the most important baseball player we have. It is that this relationship, this Ippei and Shohei relationship, has become a huge part of the Shohei story, combined with the secrecy and privacy of Shohei's life, right? And the fact that over the last few months, before he became a Dodger and after he became a Dodger, we have started to see closer glimpses of what Shohei Ohtani is actually like as a person. We've started to actually have him open up to the world in some ways. And so when you combine all those factors on top of the timing of they are in Korea and he is, opening his Dodgers tenure in this unusual place in the middle of the night in Los Angeles, and all of these things, like all of it combined is why it was so difficult to truly start to process as we start reading through the ESPN report.